If you'd asked me 3 months ago about aliens, I would have said they'd either be benevolent space hippies wanting to teach us about cosmic harmony, or they'd look like Jeff Goldblum's nightmares in The Fly. Turns out, the universe has a sick sense of humor. The Novarchi were neither. They arrived on a Tuesday. Because of course they did. Nobody takes Tuesday seriously, which made it the perfect day for an invasion. Their ships didn't hover dramatically over major landmarks like in the movies. No, they parked themselves in geosynchronous orbit and started methodically taking out our infrastructure with surgical precision. Power grids? Gone. Internet? Obliterated. Military bases? Smoking craters. Starbucks? Still charging $7 for a latte. Because apparently not even an alien apocalypse can stop capitalism. I was in Denver when it happened, stuck in traffic and cursing my decision to move to the city with the best work-life balance in America. The sky turned an unnatural purple before the first energy pulse hit downtown. The skyscrapers didn't explode dramatically, they just dissolved, turned to dust, along with everyone inside them. The president lasted 6 hours before the White House got vaporized. The Joint Chiefs made it to 12. By day 3, every organized military response on the planet had been neutralized. The Novarchi didn't even bother with foot soldiers at first. Why would they? Their tech was so advanced it made our most sophisticated weapons look like slingshots and pointy sticks. On day 7, they finally revealed themselves, every functioning screen on Earth lit up with the same image, a tall, slender being with metallic blue skin and 4 arms. It had no visible mouth, but its voice resonated from some kind of translator device on what I guess was its chest. "People of Earth," it said, in that condescending tone universal to all conquerors. "I am Supreme Commander Zhulkaar of the Novarchi Dominion. Your planet has been claimed for resource extraction. Your resistance has been amusing, like watching infant creatures discover their limbs." The creature made a sound that might have been laughter. We expected at least minimal challenge from the species that sends such noisy transmissions into space. Your music, your television shows, your endless declarations of your own greatness. Yet here you are, conquered in a standard week. Hardly worth the fuel we expended to get here. Commander Zhulkaar adjusted something on his wrist, effective immediately. All humans are to report to collection centers being established in your former urban areas. Those who comply will be permitted to live as labor resources. Those who resist will be processed into fertilizer for your planet's repurposing. You have 48 hours to surrender. The broadcast cut out, replaced by maps showing the locations of these collection centers. That's when I decided I wasn't going to be collected, processed, or repurposed. The Novarchi might have won the first round, but if there's one thing humans excel at, it's being stubborn, ornery pains in the ass when someone tells us what to do. And if these blue metallic bastards thought humanity was going down without a fight, they were about to learn a harsh lesson in what makes our species so dangerous. We're at our most creative when we're cornered. My name is Captain Eliza Thorne, former Air Force combat pilot and, as of the apocalypse, reluctant resistance leader. The nickname came from my habit of rewiring things to explode when they shouldn't. My co called it an alarming talent for destructive improvisation. I called it practical problem solving. 2 weeks after the invasion, I was holed up in what used to be a missile silo in eastern Colorado, converted years ago into a doomsday prepper's paradise by some eccentric billionaire. Now it was home to the most dysfunctional resistance cell on the planet. "You want to do what?" Dr. Marcus Fleming stared at me like I'd suggested we defeat the aliens with interpretive dance. Marcus was a neurobiologist who'd been at a conference near the silo when everything went to hell. His specialty was brain chemistry, which wasn't immediately useful for fighting aliens, but he was smart and hadn't gotten on my nerves yet. "I want to capture one," I repeated, pointing at the crude sketch of a Novarchi foot soldier. After their victory broadcast, they'd finally deployed ground troops to round up humans. "We need to understand what we're fighting." "With all due respect, Captain." "That's suicide," said Garrett Wu, our resident tech genius who'd been working at security for the missile silo. "Those things are nearly 8 feet tall and have 4 arms. And skin like metal," added Danny Rodriguez, a former NNA fighter I'd found beating the crap out of a Novarchi drone with a baseball bat. I hit one with my truck going 60. It dented my hood. I rolled my eyes. That's why we're not going to fight one head-on. We're going to outsmart it. The fourth member of our group, an elderly man everyone just called Doc, who claimed to have been everything from a CIA operative to a Vegas magician, chuckled from his corner. She's right. The Novarchi have a weakness. Everyone turned to look at him. They're arrogant, Doc said simply. They think they've won already. Arrogance makes you sloppy. He wasn't wrong. In the days following the invasion, the aliens had gotten complacent. Their patrols were becoming routine, predictable. And I'd noticed something else during my reconnaissance missions. They also have garbage night vision, I said, pulling out a notebook filled with observations. They rely heavily on tech for low-light situations. And when it rains. They move slower, Danny finished, eyes widening with realization. I've seen it too. They hate the rain. Marcus leaned forward. Water affects them. That's interesting. Very interesting. Garrett was already typing furiously on his laptop. If they're susceptible to water, maybe other Earth elements affect them too. Their biochemistry must be radically different. Exactly, I grinned. So here's the plan. There's a patrol that passes by Miller's Creek every night at 2300 hours. 2 soldiers, same route, every time. Tonight, we're going fishing. For an 8-foot-tall metal man with 4 arms, Danny said dryly. Who probably wants to liquefy our organs, added Marcus, and could call for backup that would vaporize us, Garrett chimed in. Doc stood up, cracking his knuckles. Sounds like my kind of party. That night, as rain poured down over the Colorado plains, we set our trap. It wasn't sophisticated, just a pit covered with a tarp and camouflage, positioned directly in their patrol route. Above it, we'd rigged a container of water to dump on any Novarchi that fell in. Primitive? Yes, but sometimes the oldest tricks work best. As the aliens approached, moving sluggishly in the downpour, I held my breath. The lead soldier stepped right onto our trap, and for one horrible moment, nothing happened. Then the ground gave way, and 8 feet of alien death machine disappeared with a crash and a very Uni-like yelp of surprise. We descended on the pit like vultures, dumping water on the creature as it thrashed and emitted high-pitched squealing noises. Its partner turned to run, but Danny was faster, tackling it from behind while Doc fired our jury-rigged water cannon, essentially a fire hose connected to a pump. The alien's movements became increasingly sluggish until finally it stopped moving altogether. Are they dead? Marcus asked, poking one with a stick. No, I said, studying their now dulled metal skin. I think they're in some kind of defensive shutdown. It's like hibernation. Garrett was already examining their technology. This is amazing. Their suits are interfacing with their biology somehow. We need to get them back to the silo, I said, and quickly. Because I guarantee when these 2 don't report in, we're going to have company. As we loaded our unconscious prizes into our retrofitted delivery van, I couldn't help but smile. The Novarchi thought they had conquered Earth in a week. They were about to discover that humans are notoriously bad at accepting defeat, especially when we're fighting for our home. Our first real mission against the Novarchi was, objectively speaking, a complete disaster. And by complete disaster, I mean it was the kind of catastrophic failure military academies would one day use as a textbook example of how not to conduct an operation if, humans survived long enough to have military academies again. The plan was simple: infiltrate a Novarchi collection center, plant homemade explosives, courtesy of yours truly, free the human captives, and disappear before the aliens knew what hit them. Clean, straightforward, minimal chance of dying horribly. Yeah, right. Everything went sideways approximately 12 seconds after we breached the perimeter. Turns out, Novarchi have heat sensors that can detect humans through walls. Who knew? You do? Well, we did, technically, thanks to the intel we'd gathered from our captured lieutenant. but we thought we'd accounted for that with special suits Garrett had designed to mask our thermal signatures. Spoiler alert, they didn't work. Spark. We've got company. Dani hissed into her radio as alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Lots of company. I ducked behind a storage container as energy bolts sizzled past my head. Fall back to position 2. Doc, what's your status on the charges? Minor setback, Doc's calm voice replied. I seem to have set the timer for 30 seconds instead of 30 minutes. I nearly choked. You what? In my defense, their numerical system is very confusing. The good news is we should definitely run now. Marcus's panicked voice cut in. The captives are in a different section than our intel indicated. I can't reach them before. Everybody out, I shouted, already sprinting toward our extraction point. Move, move, move. We barely made it 300 yards from the facility when the world turned upside down. The explosion wasn't the controlled demolition we'd planned. It was more like a miniature sun decided to take a vacation on Earth. The shockwave threw us all to the ground, and when I looked back, the entire collection center was, well, gone. In its place was a swirling vortex of light and energy, a churning maelstrom that seemed to be pulling everything nearby into its center. Doc, I said slowly, watching as Novarchi's ships and debris were sucked into the vortex. What exactly did you put in those explosives? Doc adjusted his singed eyebrows. Standard C4, with a few modifications. And, perhaps, a small sample of the energy core from our Novarchi prisoner's suit. You used alien tech in a bomb? Garrett shrieked. It seemed like a good idea at the time, Doc replied mildly, and in my defense, it worked spectacularly well. He wasn't wrong. The facility was obliterated, along with at least 30 Novarchi soldiers and 3 of their ships. The problem was, we hadn't managed to free a single captive. Or so we thought. As we watched in stunned silence, the vortex suddenly collapsed in on itself with a thunderous boom. And where the collection center had stood, hundreds of confused humans were now picking themselves up off the ground, looking dazed but very much alive. What just happened? Dani whispered. Marcus was staring at his tablet, which was somehow still functioning. If I'm reading this correctly, and I'm not saying I am because this defies several laws of physics, the explosion didn't destroy the captives. It seems to have teleported them. The energy core must have interacted with the Novarchi containment technology. We accidentally discovered teleportation, Garrett said faintly. I prefer to think of it as an intentionally unintentional success, Doc replied. Before we could celebrate our accidental victory, a Novarchi ship appeared on the horizon, no doubt investigating the explosion. We quickly gathered as many of the freed captives as we could and disappeared into the network of abandoned subway tunnels we'd been using as escape routes. 2 days later, we intercepted a Novarchi communication that made our jaws drop. The translated message read, "Alert to all units. Human resistance forces have demonstrated mastery of dimensional displacement technology. Exercise extreme caution. Tactical assessment of human threat level upgraded from negligible to moderate." They think we have teleportation technology, I said, unable to keep the glee from my voice. They think we did that on purpose, Marcus added, equally amazed. Garrett was already furiously taking notes. This changes everything. If they believe we're more advanced than we are, they'll start making mistakes, Doc finished. Fear makes everyone sloppy, even aliens. Our catastrophic failure had turned into an unexpected psychological victory. The Novarchi were confused, and for the first time since the invasion, they were concerned. They'd expected to crush a primitive species, but now they were facing an enemy they didn't understand. And nothing is more terrifying than an enemy you've underestimated. 3 weeks after our dimensional displacement incident, the Novarchi did something truly bizarre. They threw a party. Not just any party. A full-blown, extravagant, we've conquered these pathetic humans celebration. Apparently, Supreme Commander Zhulkaar had declared Earth officially pacified and deemed the resistance, That's us, nothing more than an insignificant irritation, but soon to be sterilized. We learned about this because they literally sent invitations, actual physical cards delivered by their drone couriers to the ruined government buildings of every major city. The Novarchi were hosting a victory gala at what used to be the United Nations headquarters in New York, and every high-ranking alien official on Earth would be attending. It's a trap. Garrett declared immediately when I brought the news back to our expanded base of operations. We'd moved to a larger underground facility and gained about 200 resistance fighters since our accidental teleportation stunt. Of course, it's a trap, I agreed. But it's also an opportunity we can't pass up. Dani raised an eyebrow. You want to crash an alien party? I want to do more than crash it, I grinned. I want to be the entertainment. Doc chuckled from his workbench where he was tinkering with something that occasionally sparked ominously. I like where this is going. And planning the infiltration took every resource we had. We'd captured more Novarchi technology over the past weeks and learned a great deal about their biology and social structure. They were hierarchical to a fault, with elaborate rituals of deference that bordered on the ridiculous. Their higher castes were physically distinguishable by the patterns on their metallic skin, patterns they were extremely proud of and enhanced with special paints for ceremonial occasions. Most importantly, we'd discovered that their universal translators had a critical flaw. They couldn't distinguish between human languages if spoken with certain tonal patterns. To them, Finnish spoken backwards sounded identical to their own ceremonial formal address. This is the stupidest plan we've ever had, Marcus complained as I helped him into the elaborate costume we'd constructed from captured Novarchi ceremonial garments. With platform boots and an intricate exoskeleton hidden beneath the alien robes, he looked surprisingly convincing as a Novarchi dignitary. Stupider than the time we tried to jam their communications by broadcasting every episode of Friends on their frequency. I asked innocently. That actually worked, he grumbled. And this will too, I assured him, adjusting his translator device. Just remember to speak exactly as we practiced. The plan was deliciously simple in its audacity. Marcus and Doc, disguised as Novarchi officials from their distant colonies, would attend the celebration. Garrett, using hacked Novarchi tech, would run interference from our mobile command center. Dani and I, along with a team of our best fighters, would infiltrate the building through the old maintenance tunnels beneath the UN. The night of the celebration arrived with clear skies and a full moon, which felt either poetically appropriate or ominously portentous, depending on your outlook. The Novarchi had transformed the UN building into a glittering monument to their own superiority, with strange bioluminescent decorations and gravity-defying sculptures that hurt your eyes if you looked at them too long. From our observation point across the East River, we watched the alien dignitaries arrive in their sleek vessels. Showtime, I whispered into my comm. Masks on, everyone. Let's go give these smug bastards a real Earth welcome. As Marcus and Doc made their grand entrance, the Finnish backward-speaking trick worked perfectly. Dani and I led our team through the dank tunnels beneath the building. We emerged into a service area where Novarchi had set up their food preparation, if you could call the bizarre gelatinous substances they consumed food. In position, I whispered into my comm. Garrett's status? Their security systems are experiencing mysterious glitches, his voice replied, satisfaction evident. Cameras in the northeast quadrant are on a loop. You're clear to move up. We made our way through the building. Placing our special packages, Doc's improved explosives, combined with a nasty surprise we'd engineered from the Novarchi's own technology at strategic points. Above us, we could hear the celebration in full swing. The strange harmonic tones of Novarchi speech punctuated by what sounded disturbingly like laughter. Finally, I reached a service balcony overlooking the main hall and nearly gasped at the sight. Hundreds of Novarchi were gathered, their metallic skin gleaming under floating light orbs. At the center stood Supreme Commander Zhulkaar, taller and more imposing than in his broadcasts, gesturing grandly as he addressed the crowd. And so we claim this insignificant world for the glory of the Dominion, his translator boomed. Earth's resources will fuel our expansion for decades to come, and its conquered species will serve as a testament to our superiority. The assembled aliens made a sound like grinding metal that I assumed was cheering. The humans believed themselves to be special, Zhulkaar continued, obvious contempt in his voice. They filled their transmissions with tales of their own greatness, stories of overcoming impossible odds, defeating powerful enemies through what they call human ingenuity. He made that grinding laugh sound again. Yet when faced with actual superior beings, they crumbled within days. Their resistance is so pathetic that I have allocated merely 1/10 of our standard occupation force to maintain control of the entire planet. More alien laughter. I gritted my teeth, finger hovering over the detonator in my hand. What shall we drink to first, my esteemed comrades? Zhulkaar raised a container of swirling blue liquid. To the easiest conquest in Dominion history. To the primitives, who thought they were worthy of the stars. Or perhaps, how about a toast to human ingenuity? Doc's voice rang out clearly, his translator broadcasting in perfect Novarchi tones as he stepped forward, removing his disguise with a flourish that would make any Vegas magician proud. The hall fell silent. After all, Doc continued pleasantly, you haven't actually seen it yet. You know that moment in action movies where the hero says something cool right before everything explodes? Turns out, it's way more satisfying in real life. The look on Commander Zhulkaar's face, or whatever passed for a face on that metallic blue mug of his, was absolutely priceless. 4 distinct emotions crossed it in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally, the dawning horror of someone who's just realized they've made a catastrophic mistake. Now, I shouted into my comm, pressing the detonator. But we didn't blow up the building. That would have been predictable. No, what we'd planted throughout the UN headquarters was much more creative. Our first few weeks studying captured Novarchi had revealed something fascinating. Their metallic skin wasn't armor, it was their actual epidermis. And it had an almost allergic reaction to a specific earth substance. Not water, as we'd first thought, that just temporarily disrupted their external tech systems. The real kryptonite for these aliens, ordinary table salt dissolved in vinegar. Yeah, I know, anticlimactic, but highly effective. The devices we'd planted around the building weren't bombs. They were industrial-sized pressure sprayers loaded with our special salt vinegar solution, rigged to Novarchi motion sensors. The moment I hit the detonator, every sprinkler in the ceiling activated, dousing the assembled alien dignitaries in a fine mist of our concoction. The effect was instantaneous and gloriously chaotic. The Novarchi's metallic skin began to bubble and dull, turning from shiny blue to a sickly gray. Not lethal, we weren't monsters, but extremely uncomfortable and completely disruptive to all their integrated tech. Their translators failed first, followed by their communication devices, their weapons, and finally, the neural interfaces that linked them to their ships and central command. As Zhulkaar clawed at his dissolving translator, I leapt onto the banister of my observation balcony. "Attention, Novarchi Dominion," I shouted, my voice echoing through the suddenly silent hall. "Captain Eliza Thorne of Earth's Unified Resistance. Consider this humanity's formal response to your invasion." Dani and her team burst through the main doors, armed with modified Novarchi weapons we'd reconfigured to work for human operators. Marcus dropped his disguise and activated the second phase of our plan, a targeted electromagnetic pulse that fried every piece of alien tech in a half-mile radius. "You see," I continued, jumping down to approach the stunned commander, "there's something you should understand about humans. We're stubborn. We're resourceful. And we get really creative when we're backed into a corner." Zhulkaar made a series of clicking sounds that his failing translator rendered as, "Impossible. You are primitive. How did you?" "Oh, and we're also excellent actors," I grinned. "All those pathetic resistance efforts, the ones that seemed so disorganized and ineffective, we wanted you to think that." That wasn't entirely true, of course. We'd been making it up as we went along. But the psychological effect of suggesting all our previous failures had been elaborate misdirection was worth its weight in gold. Garrett's voice came through my earpiece. "Spark, it's working. Their entire command network is crashing. Their ships are dropping offline all over the planet." Throughout the hall, Novarchi soldiers were collapsing, their systems overloaded by the combination of our spray and the EMP. The higher caste officials were faring slightly better, But they were clearly disoriented and panicking, proving once again that no matter what planet you're from, privileged elites fall apart the moment their tech stops working. "This is impossible," Zhulkaar hissed, his translator sputtering out its final words. "You were supposed to be easy." I leaned in close. "That's your first mistake. Nothing about humanity is easy." Doc appeared at my side, holding what looked like a modified Novarchi communication device. "The broadcast is ready, Captain." We'd hacked into the Novarchi's global communication network. Every alien on Earth, every ship in orbit, was about to receive the same message. I took the device and stared directly into its recording sensor. "To all Novarchi forces on Earth and in orbit, your command structure has been neutralized, your technology has been compromised, and this is just the beginning." I gestured around at the chaos in the hall. This was accomplished by a small resistance cell with limited resources. Imagine what we can do with the full force of humanity behind us. You have 24 hours to surrender and withdraw from Earth, or we start getting really unpleasant. Doc added helpfully, "We haven't even shown you what we can do with peanut butter yet. Trust me, you don't want to find out." I wasn't sure if the Novarchi even knew what peanut butter was, but the threat sounded appropriately ominous. As the message transmitted, the remaining conscious Novarchi in the hall looked at each other with what I could only interpret as the universal expression for "we've made a terrible mistake." And just like that, the invincible conquerors of Earth didn't look so invincible anymore. The Novarchi surrendered 3 days later. Not because they believed our bluff about having more devastating weapons in reserve, though that certainly helped, but because we'd exposed something they feared more than defeat: incompetence. Barry. As we learned during the negotiation process, conducted via modified translators with the few Novarchi officials still able to communicate, the invasion of Earth had been a relatively minor operation in their galactic campaign. They'd allocated minimal resources because, based on our transmitted media and signals, they'd assessed us as a species with delusions of grandeur, but limited actual capabilities. In other words, they thought we were all talk. Commander Zhulkaar, still suffering from the effects of our salt vinegar solution, his once shiny skin now permanently dulled to the color of wet cement, explained it with obvious embarrassment. "Your entertainment broadcast suggested you had already repelled multiple alien invasions," he said, translator crackling. "Yet your actual technology was primitive. We assumed your species was simply delusional." "Wait," I interrupted, barely containing my laughter. "You watched Independence Day and thought it was a documentary." The alien made that grinding sound that indicated discomfort. "We monitor thousands of worlds. It is not always simple to distinguish fact from fiction in transmitted signals." Doc, who'd appointed himself our chief diplomatic officer, despite my protests, stroked his beard thoughtfully. "So you invaded Earth because you thought we were lying about being tough? Resource acquisition was the primary objective," Zhulkaar corrected stiffly. "But yes, your planet was designated low risk based on the discrepancy between your claimed victories and your actual capabilities." Marcus couldn't contain himself. "You got beaten by a species you invaded specifically because you thought they were pushovers." The Novarchi commander's skin darkened in what we'd come to recognize as their version of a blush. The terms of surrender were straightforward: complete withdrawal from Earth, reparations for the damage caused, and a non-aggression pact that essentially boiled down to leave us alone, and we'll leave you alone. We also demanded their atmospheric repair technology to help fix the environmental damage from their initial attack. As the last Novarchi ships prepared to depart from orbit, Zhulkaar requested a final meeting. I agreed, more out of curiosity than anything else. We met on the observation deck of their command ship, Earth's blue curve visible through the transparent ceiling. The commander had recovered somewhat, though his skin would never regain its former luster, a permanent reminder of his failure here. "There is something you should know, Captain Thorne," he said, his new translator rendering his words with perfect clarity. "Earth was not randomly selected for conquest." I raised an eyebrow. "No? Your world sits at a strategic junction of what will soon become a major conflict zone. The Dominion is not the only power in this sector of the galaxy." A holographic display activated, showing a three-dimensional map of nearby star systems. Several regions were highlighted in different colors. Here he indicated a section pulsing with angry red light. The Krell Imperium expands. They make the Dominion seem benevolent by comparison. They do not conquer worlds. They consume them. Why are you telling me this? Because they will come, Zhulkaar said simply. Perhaps not tomorrow, perhaps not for years, but they will come. And when they do, you will need more than salt and vinegar to stop them. I studied the alien's face, looking for deception. Is this some kind of trick to make us dependent on Novarchi protection? The Dominion will not return to this sector, he said firmly. Our failure here has been noted by our leadership. But the data package I am providing contains everything we know about the Krell. To consider it a professional courtesy, from one military commander to another, from one who underestimated you to one who hopes others will make the same mistake. There was something almost like respect in his voice. As I prepared to leave, Zhulkaar added one final comment. Your species' entertainment transmissions make more sense to me now, Captain Thorne. Your stories about overcoming impossible odds against superior forces, they were not delusions of grandeur after all. They were aspirational. I couldn't help but smile. We call it manifest destiny, Commander. Humans have a habit of making the impossible happen, especially when someone tells us we can't. The Novarchi departed Earth's orbit that evening, their ships vanishing into the depths of space without ceremony. We released the news of their surrender gradually, helping to restore order to a world still reeling from the brief but devastating occupation. 6 months later, Earth was well on its way to recovery. The Resistance had evolved into a global defense initiative, with Garrett heading up a division dedicated to adapting Novarchi technology for human use. Marcus was leading research into interstellar biology, using the samples we'd collected. Dani had established a worldwide training program for what she optimistically called future space marines. Doc, surprising no one, had vanished mysteriously, leaving only a note that read, "Gone fishing for bigger fish. Back when needed." As for me, I spent most of my time in the new Planetary Defense Headquarters, formerly the Novarchi Command Center in what used to be Geneva. My office overlooked the lake, restored to its pristine blue by alien atmospheric scrubbers. On my desk sat 2 items, the salt vinegar sprayer we'd used at the UN, preserved as a memento, and the data crystal Zhulkaar had given me, now partially decoded. The information it contained was troubling, to say the least. The Krell Imperium made the Novarchi look like amateurs, with technology that seemed to border on the magical. And according to the projections, they'd reach our solar system within 5 years. But as I studied the reports, I found myself smiling. Because there was one critical piece of information buried in the Novarchi intelligence. The Krell had a fatal weakness to a common Earth substance, something so abundant we practically took it for granted. Apparently, the silicon dioxide in ordinary beach sand disrupted their molecular structure catastrophically. I leaned back in my chair, looking up at the stars now visible through my office's transparent ceiling. Somewhere out there the Krell were coming, believing they would find an easy conquest. They had no idea what they were in for. Humanity hadn't just survived its first alien invasion, we'd learned from it. We'd adapted. And next time, we wouldn't be starting from scratch. Bring it on, I whispered to the distant stars. We've got plenty of sand,